Okay, then. As always, if there's questions at any time, feel free to ask. So today we're going to talk about RESTful web services and how you can consume them from an Android application. Now, if you're not familiar, REST stands for Representational State Transfer. And basically the idea is that any type of data that you're going to be getting from the network is represented as a resource. So you have an identifier for specific pieces of data. You have groups of specific types of data, and then you can extend on that to do some searches and things like that. All the interaction is done via HTTP methods, and there's 4 methods that we use here: get, post, put, and delete. Each of them has a specific meaning in REST. Your paths that you're going to specify to represent a piece of data on the network look very, very simple. They're HTTP or HTTPS, some server and port, and then a path, and then a type and an ID. Now, if you just specify type, you're really talking about, whoops, let me go back. You're talking about a collection of things that you can deal with. So you can either get a collection of things, you can create a new item in the collection, you can update an item in a collection or delete an item in a collection. If you specify the ID on there, that's when you can do the update and the delete and actually the update and delete. If you just specify the type by itself, you're going to get an entire list of things. Um, there's an unofficial extension to REST where you basically just add some parameters. So if you want to do a search, you could put $name equals Scott, and that might be able to filter down things based on a given item. We're not going to be using that in our example. We're just going to be extending our movies example to use a REST service. Each of those REST methods has a specific meaning. It's different types of CRUD operations. If we're doing a get REST method, so that's basically if you went into a browser, for example, and just typed in an ID, you would end up performing a get against the server, which will just read data and return it to you, whether you're reading the entire collection or whether you're reading a specific ID or if you had parameters to filter it down. The post method is used to create an item inside of a collection. Put ends up updating an item with a specific ID, and delete ends up deleting items with a specific ID as well. The results coming back can be in pretty much any format you want. It's very common to return it as JSON. XML is a little less common, but depending on the structure of your data, XML might give you a little bit more robustness. But you could also return other types if you wanted to, like protobufs. To get some data back, the most common format coming back is JSON. This stands for JavaScript Object Notation. And the reason it's JavaScript Object Notation is because the actual notation is JavaScript. It just is a way of specifying a definition of objects or lists of objects. JSON has a strict tree structure. It's you start with a root, you have children, each of those can have children, and so on. And because of this, you can't have any type of cycles in your data. You'd have to go with some special extensions to be able to do that, and it gets a little bit sneaky. I've used some different approaches to have more complex linking between things in JSON, and it almost never works out well. It's kind of gross. But you really have to handle it yourself, whatever the format you're choosing. The basic definition of JSON is at json.org, and there's a bunch of different libraries they list from json.org on ways to access it from different languages. So here's an example of a JSON object and a JSON list. A JSON object starts with open curlies, and then you have name value pairs. So the name should be quoted. It is possible to do it without quotes. The problem is if you end up using that in JavaScript and you don't have quotes there, if you happen to have a variable called name, it'll end up evaluating it. So you really want to avoid that. Each of these subfields that we have inside here could themselves be objects or other lists of objects. A list is represented by square brackets and then the items separated by comma. So in this case, we have a list of objects. You could also do lists of lists. You could do lists of strings, any number of combinations there, and it's fairly simple to work with. The thing I like most about JSON is it tends to be a little more terse than XML. XML is kind of wordy. JSON is a lot more terse and a little bit more readable. Now, in order to set up your REST server, and we're not really going to care too much about how this happens for this class, but we'll use a really simple Jersey server for this. We set up a class called a controller, and then a bunch of functions with some annotations defining how you access that function from a client. So in this case, a client would pass in some URL going to the server, and then a slash, and then movie, and they would end up having this get movies function called. And what the get movies function is going to do here is he's going to pull in a list of movie values, sort them by title, wrap that into a response object, and set the status to OK. And there's some simpler functions we can use to actually implement that. But this ends up being a really simple way to do a server. Now, on the client side, again, you can use any type of library to access it. The example that we're going to do is using Retrofit 2. And Retrofit ends up allowing you to specify an interface that it creates an implementation of to pull responses from a server. So in this particular example, our movie API service is going to represent several URLs we can specify in the server. So if we just had a movie, if we call this get all movies, it'll make a request to movie for get and return a list of movies from the server. Whoops. If we specify get movie with an ID, it's going to send a request to the server movie / whatever that ID is, and then return a response that has a movie. Now these response objects basically keep track of what the result was. Was it success? Was it failure? Different error codes, things like that, as well as what they call a body, which is this parameter passed in as a generic. This one down here is updating a movie using the put method. So if you call update movie, passing in an ID and then the movie as your body, I keep clicking, then it's going to make a put request to the server, and it'll return an integer representing the number of items that were returning the number of items that were updated on the server. This creation down here is just the way that Retrofit gets that the implementation that it creates for this. Okay, so let's actually see what we can do with this. What we're going to do is we're going to start with a copy of our movies application. So I took the movie UE2 application, made a copy of it, and just rename it to movies UE2-rest. And we'll see if this is actually going to work for us. What I'm going to do to start with is we'll just go ahead and put a really simple a module in here that's a REST server that we can run. This is normally not something you'd put inside an Android project. I'm just doing it here for convenience so that we have a little server that you could run along with the example. So to do that in here, I'm going to right-click and say New Module. And we're going to make this a Java or Kotlin library because it's not actually going to need any Android support. I'm going to call it REST Server. And let's actually make this be movies.rest server. And let's do a REST controller in there that will specify using Jersey. And use Kotlin, that's all good. Finish. And add him. And let's just close all tabs there. So now in our REST server, when we added that module, in settings.gradle, it adds a new include there as part of the build. So it will actually end up building that. Under REST server, let's take a look at what he's got. We have it specified as Java library and org JetBrains Kotlin JVM. So this is basically just Kotlin running on a Java virtual machine. I'm going to make a few tweaks here. Instead of using Java library, I'm going to use application, which will run a Java application that we're going to be building here. I will change a few things here. I'll just copy this stuff over. So instead of using those explicit source and target compatibility levels, I'm just going to specify a Java toolchain, which acts as a default for those. And down here at the bottom, we're specifying application configuration. It's an error right now because I haven't synchronized it since I made the change to use the application plugin. These are all Jersey components that we're going to be pulling in. Pardon me. And it looks like everything's good there. Let me do a sync. And we should see this application clean up in just a moment here. There we go. Now, in this application configuration block, we're going to configure which application runs when we actually do a Gradle W run command. So let's take a look at, first of all, that little server running guy. I'm just going to paste him in there. Excuse me. So what this guy is doing, I just put a little comment here about where I got the basic concept of how to run a Jersey application. I don't do this very often, so I took a look online to find a way to do it that worked and found a good one. So this is all the runner does. He's going to use a Grizzly HTTP server factories. This is basically just an in-memory HTTP server that I'm going to run on localhost 8080. And then I'm going to register the register controller class and the Jackson mapper provider, which is part of one of those libraries. So if I look in here, where's Jackson in this? I think it's just, oh, here we go. Here's Jackson. So this here, Jackson ends up serializing to and from JSON. So we're specifying that we want to register that provider with retrofit, or not retrofit, Jersey, and the controller that we're going to create. So now we got to fill in the details on that controller. We're going to kind of pull him up as we go here. So the first thing that I want to do is specify a path for him. And I'm just going to say I'm using the root of the server that I'm creating and running here. And then inside there, I'm going to do some set up some different functions or different methods with URLs that the client can call. So as an example here, I could say, let me create a GET, and I'm going to give him a path of rating to get all our ratings. And I'm going to say that he produces media type dot application JSON. So this is telling Jersey to end up creating JSON from the return code that I give. So I'm actually just going to return an object and it'll get converted into JSON automatically. So this is just going to be a function called getRatings, which is going to return a response. And I'm going to have to specify what that actually does. Now I'm going to set up a couple little helper functions here to create these responses. Let's copy these guys over. Pardon me. So this general response function up here is going to say, I'm going to create a response object, setting the status, setting the entity, and then building it. And so this will take whatever status comes in, wrap whatever the entity is, converting it into JSON, and then returning it. I'm going to use a couple separate functions here to make this a little simpler to deal with. If I say OK with an entity, it's going to create that response passing in status OK and the entity. If I say not found, it'll create the response with the not found code and the entity. If I say created, it's going to create a response with the created status and then the entity. So this is basically a HTTP code 200. The not found is the 404, and the created, I think, is a 204 or a 205. Well, he just has an ordinal there. But it's just a return code saying that it actually created something on the server. Pardon me, I still got a little bit of a cough. It's getting better, though. Okay, so now this is going to allow me to return some stuff. So what I'd like to do is return a bunch of ratings when I ask for those ratings. So I'm going to say OK, passing in my list of ratings to return. Now that means, of course, I have to specify my list of ratings. So let me go ahead and create that. We'll just paste him in over here. So I'm using a companion object, which is a singleton that's along for the ride for any instance of REST controller that gets created. So the REST controller will be able to access all of this information, but there's only one copy of all this information kept, rather than having all of these fields inside every single instance of the REST controller. Now we're going to need a rating object to work with. Let's create one of him. So I'm going to say new file. I'm just going to call it rating. And we need to specify this a little bit different than we did with our room specification. We're going to be using some annotations for Jackson, which is that converter that goes to and from JSON, so that he can understand our objects. So I'm going to start by pasting in a little copy of a rating object here. And we start off by saying XML root element, and don't let the XML fool you. We're going to be converting it into JSON, but this is just saying that this is an object that can stand alone when it's actually sent out as a response to the client. We're specifying the names of the properties in the JSON, ID, name, and description, and then the actual properties themselves. So this should actually look fairly similar for what we specified for our rating before, where we have an ID that defaults to a random UUID if it's being created new. We have a name and a description as well. Now we're also going to want to specify movies and actors and roles. So I'm just going to copy those guys over. Well, let me just do it this way. New movie and new actor and new role. I'm going to tell this thing just always do that. So if we take a look at the actor, he's going to look pretty familiar. So there's our actor with the ID and the name. And then let's take a look at rating. Well, rating I already did. Role. And movie. Copy him over. And the fields are all very similar to what we've done before. What we're going to end up doing here is we're going to try replacing the repository with a repository that connects to this REST server instead of using our local database. And if all goes well, it should be a drop-in replacement. Now there's a couple little things that'll be a little trickier to implement that I'm going to kind of wave my hands at because I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole in this. Mainly with regard to setting up the special flow that I did for that edit capability. Okay, so we got him. Let's just see. So actor, movie, rating, and role. So we got all of those guys in there. Same kind of fields that we had before. So if we go back to our controller, now we'll see that the ratings all look just fine. And I set up a couple little ways of specifying all these ratings together. I created a list of all the ratings. Note that this is a static list. Later on, when we talk about doing updates and deletes, we're going to kind of wave our hands at the ratings because the ratings are fixed entities here. So we're just going to leave those as is. If you really were fleshing out this application and wanted to be able to add and remove those, you'd make these dynamic in the data structures just like we did for the movie and the roles and the actors. Now I'm also setting up an index here. This is just going to be so that we can actually look up ratings by ID. And we're doing that by saying take this list of ratings, associate them by the IDs. And what this does is it creates a map where it maps each ID to the object itself. So that's actually very much the same as if I said map it.id to it.toMap. And what this does is this creates a pair object. So we're going to have a pair where the first value is the ID, the second value is the object itself. we've converted each of those ratings into one of those pairs, and then we're taking that list of pairs and converting it into a map so we can actually look things up by ID. The associate by does exactly this a little bit more efficiently because it doesn't have to create that intermediate list of pairs. Okay, so we have him. Boom, now we got some ratings. That's kind of the easy part of things. Things get a little trickier when we actually deal with some real data. So let's see how we're going to actually track all of our data. Let me just copy that part in there. Yeah, that sounds good. So we will just paste in up here. Actually, I want those in the controller. There we go. And what I'm doing is just creating some maps to hold our data. So we have a map of ID movie, ID actor, and then I have a few ways to actually get at the data just to help me index things a little bit more quickly. Now, when you do this, it makes the actual updates a little trickier because you have to make sure that you're updating these indices as well as actually updating the objects themselves. So this one here is going to give me a list of all the roles by a movie ID, roles by actor ID, and movies by rating ID. So these are just maps of the ID of the movie and then a list of roles. The ID of the actor and a list of roles. The ID of a rating and a list of movies. So when we create those, we can actually index them kind of nicely. So let's go ahead and create our data now. And this is going to be pretty similar to what we did before. Let me copy this guy. So this is going to be a nice little reset database function. And this will be accessed if the user goes to localhost 8080/reset. The result coming back is just going to be plain text. And I'm just returning an integer there. I could have actually returned an integer instead of plain text. So what I'm going to do is clear all the indices, and then I'm going to insert movies, insert actors, and insert roles. So let's see what those types of insertions look like. Let's see, insert movies. Yeah, let's grab these guys. There we go. And I'm gonna paste these up here. Now let's start with this guy, get or create. Now there's a few functions in the Java implementation of map that will let you create a list or create a key. Create a value if it doesn't exist already. That's really all I'm doing here. I'm going to say if we call this function, we're going to try to see if the key exists. If so, return the value. Otherwise, we're going to create a brand new value that's inside there. In this case, I'm assuming that all of my maps have a key and a mutable list of some value type. So I'm passing in two generic types on this function. The key can be any type. For our case, we're only using strings for the keys, so I could have just put string there. And then a mutable list of some value, which could be a role or could be a movie, depending on which map we're actually using here. So for this get or create function, I'm going to say take a look at the receiver that was passed in, which is this map, and try to get the key. And the bracket key bracket ends up calling the get function defined on that map. And the get function will either return a value or return a null. So if it returns a value, boom, we're done. We're just going to return that and we're all set. Otherwise, Mr. Elvis here is going to create a brand new mutable list of values for us. And then I'm just going to use apply here to insert that into the list. Now the thing that gets a little tricky here is I have some nested thises happening here. For my top level, this is the receiver coming in here. That's that map. But once I'm inside this apply, this is now the mutable list that I've just created. So I need a way to escape back out to say which this I'm really talking about. Inside of here, if I just say this by itself, that's that mutable list, and that's perfectly fine. But if I want to refer to this guy up here, all I have to do is say this at get or create, because that's the receiver for get or create. So this function, this statement down here is just saying get the map set the key, set the value at the key to this mutable list. And so now I can use this function just like this. I can say roles by actor ID index getter create actor ID. If that already exists, I'm just going to add the role to it. If it doesn't exist, I'm going to create a new one, and then I can add a role to it. So that's a really nice compact way of doing that. If we had to do this in Java, it ended up getting pretty hairy with a whole bunch of logic for it. This is a much simpler way to do it in Kotlin. So when I'm inserting a role, I'm putting it in both indices here. So I can look it up by ID or by actor. For inserting actors, all I'm going to do is add them to the actor index. So this one's direct. I don't need that getter create because there's no list that I'm dealing with at this point. I'm just going to look up the actors and boom, set them up. When I'm inserting a movie, there's an extra step of indexing. That's for that ratings lookup. So we can look up movies by the rating. So again, we're going to take that map called getter create, see if we have a list of ratings already for that movie. If not, list of movies for that rating. If not, we're going to create that list. If so, we'll just use the existing one and then add a movie to it. And then we're also just going to index the movies. So this sets up our data kind of nicely for us. Any questions on any of this so far? This is just all the fairly simple stuff to start with. So now let's add in the gets for the list of movies and actors as well. We already had ratings. We're going to do something very, very similar here. If they say get with the movie as the first item in the path, then we're going to look at that movie's index, get all of the values, and sort them by title. We could also, if we felt this is going to happen, be called a lot, we could keep another cached instance of the sort and then use that if nothing's changed. Similar for the actors, get the values of the actors and sort them by name and return them. So those are some pretty simple things. Let's go ahead and just run this server as it is and see if we can reset the database and then get the values out of it. So to run this server, I'm going to bring up a terminal. I'm going to say .gradlew run. And what is he not happy about? Oh, I'm running it. I already got it running in another window from my previous testing. Okay, let me try this again here. Did that not stop it? Oh, I was doing it in my logcat instead of in my terminal window in the other one. Terminate job. Yes, there we go. Okay, now this should work. Okay, we'll see it started listener bound to localhost 8080. Server started. Once you get to that point, we know our server's ready to do its job. So I'm going to bring up a browser here. And we'll put localhost colon 8080. If we hit enter there, well, I didn't have a colon in there. Localhost colon 8080. And it says localhost page can't be found. That's because we don't have anything that's just the root. You have to have all those specific sub-functions. So if I did a localhost and then said, /movie, notice how it comes back with some JSON that's an empty list. There's nothing there. If I came in here and said reset, notice how it says 1 to say it's successful. And now if I go movie again, I'm going to get the list of movies coming back as JSON from the server. And I can do the same thing for actors. And for rating. Boom. And so we're getting our data back from the server. This is a good sign because now we know that our data is there. Now we're not doing anything with the more complex data yet, but this is a really good start. So from here, we should be able to use these objects to populate our lists in our main application. So if we take a look at our repository layer here, and let's create another repository that's just going to be contacting REST. So I'm going to say new, whoops, movie REST repository. And he's going to be a implementing movie repository. I'm going to go ahead and implement all those members. There's a bunch of them in there. But we're going to need to actually get our data. Now, a little gotcha here. The data coming back for ratings, movies, and actors are flows. So we're going to need to figure out some way of dealing with flows. To do this, let me just get a copy of what I had in here. La, 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 la. I'm going to use something that I'm just going to call a flow manager here. And this I'm implementing as an inner class. And what that means is that any instance of this list flow manager has access to the data in its surrounding class, or its containing class here. So when we create an instance of movie REST repository, any list flow managers we created are going to have access to that movie REST repository. The main reason we need that is so that we can get a coroutine scope to do our launch of our coroutine to actually fetch stuff from our server. Basically, what we're going to be doing here is in the REST repository, anytime we know that data has changed, we're going to want to refresh this flow, which is going to end up sending data to the user interface. That refresh is going to be this call to fetch. And to do that refresh, I don't want to do it on the thread that called it because it's probably triggered by a user interface. I want to actually create a new coroutine and then trigger it. Now for this to work, I need to have a coroutine scope. So I'm just going to use dependency injection here to say val coroutine scope. Just pass it in. So somebody else is going to have to pass it in. And we'll figure out how to do that in a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and oops, I need to set up my retrofit. So from the repository, this is going to be my client for the REST service. So inside of here, I need to set up a retrofit client. So I'm going to come in here, I'm going to call this movie API service. And that's going to be an interface. And I need to have a URL, which I'm going to need to explain. Pardon me a second. Need a cough. So whenever you're running an emulator on a computer, so when we run our application here, we're going to run an emulator for an Android device, which is going to run our application. Well, I want that application to be able to communicate to the server that I'm running on my PC here. To do that, Android gives you this URL, this server address, 10.0.2.2. If you use that IP address from inside your Android application, that refers to localhost of the machine hosting the emulator. Now, in real life, we're not going to do this. We're probably going to want to communicate to a real server somewhere. But for this application, for this example, we're just going to talk to this local server that's running on the computer that's hosting the emulator. And so that's the URL that you'd use for that. That's localhost on the host computer. Now, for our movie API service, we're going to need a way to create an instance of it. So I'm going to copy in down here a companion object, which gives us a function. Oh, I need retrofit. Let me add his dependency to the build scripts. So we'll go to the build script here inside our repository. And I'm going to add in our retrofit 2 dependencies and then resync. And now I should be able to, hello. Did I put that in the right spot? So he's in repository. Did that import okay? Come back to our API service. Okay, why is he not? Okay, 1 second. Am I missing something here? I think it's just that one that I needed. And that's in my repository project. And that's in my repository project. Just make sure. Yeah, that looks good. Is there anything interesting there? No, that's not going to help us there. Let's look at dependencies. So he's got retrofit as an implementation dependency. I'm going to try to refresh it one more time, and if that doesn't work, I think we have a caching issue here. Let me just make sure that he's in the spot that I think he is. Yeah, he's in repository, so he's in the same project. So I should have access to him, but it's not coming up. So I think what's happening is we're having a little cache corruption in Android Studio, which happens from time to time. And usually it happens at least once during this class. So here's the spot I'm going to talk about it. In order to fix this, we're going to go to the File menu and go down to Invalidate Caches. And we're going to choose Clear the File System Cache, delete embedded browser engine, and clear VCS log caches and indices. You don't have to select any of those. I'm just going to go ahead and clean those. Actually, let me keep the local history. I'm going to say invalidate and restart. And then wait for that to start back up again, and hopefully that will fix it. So this is something to try if you end up hitting a brick wall like I just did, where it looks like you're doing the right stuff and it's not working. So he's going to have to re-index our project here, which takes a little while because he's actually going to be scanning through any of the dependencies and the JDK to figure out what symbols are available to you. Hopefully that won't take too long. I'm hoping that that little progress bar jumps up to like 80% in a second here. Almost there. If you could hear my laptop, it sounds like a jet engine right now. It's working really hard. And now he's trying to figure out what the project looks like, the shape of the project, the build model. There we go. Okay, let's see if this is going to fix it. So I'm going to come back over here, control space again, and voila. So that was exactly what the deal is. Our cache information in Android Studio got corrupted. I'm going to bring this guy in as well. There we go. So this is going to create an instance of this API service. Right now, when Retrofit reads in this interface, it creates a dynamic proxy instance, which is a Java thing, which is a little in-memory class that implements this interface. Then he fills in the details, and then he'll return that from this create when we're doing the builder. So this actually let us create it. Now we can actually add some functions to it to do some interesting things. So the things that we care about right now are our calls to get the movies, get the actors, and get the ratings. So what this is saying is that in our movie API service, if the user calls get movies, we're going to go to this URL, which we specified down here when we were creating the instance of it, and pass in /movie on the end of it to actually get the list of movies. So hopefully we'll get a list of movies coming back there. Now we're going to use movie DTO here because it has the same shape of the data that we actually need. The fields all look the same, but you could specify a completely independent class with those same fields there. So it's just a plain old Kotlin object that we're specifying here. So this should get all this data from our movie API service. So now we can go back to our repository that we're creating. Let me pull in that response from Retrofit. And that's our list flow manager there. Now we got to figure out how to do these individual flows that we're going to fetch the data from. So, oh, this other guy collapsed on me. I'll find where I was. There we go. So to do this, let's first of all create an instance of that movie API service by calling that create function that creates that instance for us. And then we're going to create some flow managers to deal with the data. And all these flow managers are going to let us do is get a hold of a flow and tell us to refetch our data. The fetch function, or the fetch function that we're implementing here is get movies, get actors, get ratings. So if we take a look up in here, when we create an instance of this guy, we have this fetcher. That's the Lambda being passed in to actually how we get the data from the server. And we're going to create a mutable state flow, very similar to what we did before. We're going to have this bucket that we can throw things into. We expose that just by using flow. So these two properties are very, very similar to the way that those pairs worked in our view model before. And then we're going to dump things into that flow by fetching data out of the server. And we do that by calling the fetcher function. That's the one we passed in. We're going to call takeIf, which is a nice little function that says, take a look at this predicate, and if the predicate's true, just go ahead and return the object on through as is. If the predicate's false, we're going to return null from takeIf. So that basically lets us get to this point where we can now say, give me the body or return an empty list. Now we probably want to do something a little smarter with error codes and things like that, but this is just kind of a quick and dirty way of getting set up so you can actually see how this stuff's going to work. So we set up these flow managers. Now what we need to do is actually use them for the ratings flows. And those are actually pretty simple to do. Instead of we could do something like this, but we're not going to. I could say ratings flow manager dot flow. So anytime somebody asks for the ratings flow, we just return it. Now this means that we're going to have to go and access that property each time, and I guess that's not bad because this is it's fixed. It's not like it's regenerating it. The thing you want to be careful about when you actually just use the get functions like this is that it's going to be reevaluated every time somebody references rating flow. And in this case, that's not really a big deal. But alternatively, we could just go ahead and set this as the value for the backing field. And that's what I actually prefer to do here. And then the default getter is just going to return that value. That way we're not reevaluating this over and over. Although in this case, it's just passing through to a property, so it's not that big a deal. So this one I'm going to do the movies flow manager.flow. And then this one, we're going to do the actors flow manager.flow to return that. And now we have our 3 flow properties coming through from this nice little repository. The rest of these are all not yet implemented. And remember, the to-do function is actually going to throw an exception that says something's not yet implemented. So that way, if these accidentally get called, it'll actually blow up in our face rather than just having a little comment here saying to do and do nothing. Okay, any questions so far before we move on? Okay, let's try plugging this in. So we have this repository. Let's go up to our app and take a look at main Java movies. There's our view model. Let's see how our view model uses the repository so we can possibly replace it. If we take a look up here, our view model is getting passed in the repository as an argument. So whoever's creating that view model has the chance to choose which repository we're actually going to build. So let's go down to see where this guy is actually being created. I'm going to control click on him. And it says down here we have a return movie view model. That looks like a place it's being created, so I'm going to go down to him. And this is this nice little factory that's being used when we use the view models function. So down here we're actually saying return the movie view model, passing in movie database repository. So instead of doing that, let's just change him to be movie rest repository. And we don't have a creator for him. We're just going to create an instance of him. And we need to pass in our coroutine scope. So the question is, where does that come from? And what I'd like to do is use a coroutine scope that automatically cancels any type of coroutines that are in flight if the view model goes out of scope. So I'd like to use the view model scope of that movie view model. But you notice we got kind of a chicken and egg problem here. We're creating this movie rest repository before we create our movie view model, but our movie rest repository wants to use the scope for that view model. So that's a little tricky. Now, whenever you have one of these chicken egg type problems, usually the result is, or usually the solution is going to be, don't create the object directly, create it using a factory function, or Lambda in this case. So if we go back to the top of our movie view model here, and instead of passing the repository in directly, if we say repository factory as a function, and we're going to pass in a coroutine scope as an argument, and then create a movie repository. Now what we can do is inside the movie view model, where we're going to actually have access to that coroutine scope, we can call this factory. So I'm going to say private val repository equals repository factory, passing in view model scope. Ta-da! We've solved our nice little chicken and egg problem. And now this doesn't need to be a val anymore because he's just an argument, a constructor argument that's being used when we're doing our initialization. So now we're going to go back down to the bottom and let's implement this guy. Now first I want to fix up the previous guy here because now notice he's not going to work there. So I'm going to convert him into a lambda to do that creation. And notice our squiggles here tell us that we can actually move that outside of the parentheses, which is what I'm going to do. And then I'll turn this guy into a curly brace. And so here is how we'd end up creating this using the old view model. And notice that the old view model didn't need a coroutine scope. So we're just ignoring it, throwing it away. For the new one, though, what we're going to do is go ahead and use that. And let's go ahead and say coroutine scope there. And we'll just pass that in. Boom. Ta-da! So sometimes you can get into these tricky little issues when you're doing dependency injection like this. And again, when I say dependency injection here, this is all manual dependency injection. I'm not using any type of framework like Spring or Hilt or Dagger or anything like that. I'm just directly passing in the dependency. So the view model doesn't know or care which repository it's using. We can actually pass that in. This factory approach took care of the coroutine issue that we had. So now that we have him plugged in, let's try running it. I think we might actually get some results out of this. It'd be really cool if we see lists of things showing up. It'd be really cool if the build didn't take 16 years. I got to double check my virus scanner settings to make sure it's not scanning this directory. I don't think it is. Normally, if it is, you'll get a little pop-up from Android Studio telling you, hey, you know what? You are building inside of something that the virus scanner is dealing with. Okay, so something was not happy, and I know exactly what it is, but let's go to and try to figure out what's going on. I'm going to go to the logcat view here, and let's scroll up until we see something that looks like an exception. There, that looks like an exception. And he says, let's see about this first one up here. So an operation is not yet implemented. So it's calling one of our to-do functions somewhere in this get movie with cast flow. Let's go up a little farther here. See about some other things. I'm not sure why it's actually doing that at this point. It shouldn't be calling that one. But anyway, I'm going to kind of go up to the top exception here. And there's a couple issues we're going to see here. Clear text communication is not permitted by network security policy. So we're going to have to fix that. But then we also have operation not permitted, an EPERM thing. And we're going to come back to that in a second as well. Let's first of all solve this first one here, clear text communication. Now this is when we'd actually have to set up using secure socket layer here, so HTTPS communication to, and I really don't want to go down that rabbit hole right now because we're not doing a lot of networking here. So we're going to short circuit this, and I want you to do it in your assignment as well by telling Android that clear text communication is okay. And this is actually a really good thing that they're telling you here. It's basically, if you weren't thinking about it, oh, hey, guess what? All of your data is just going as clear text across the internet, across your network connection. So you generally don't want to do that. Set up SSL. It takes, I mean, I could spend half the class just setting that up. Don't want to do that right now. So we're going to turn it off by going into our app module and the Android manifest. And we're going to come in here and say uses clear text traffic equals true. And that'll get past that problem. So let's go ahead and run it again. I'm going to clear my logcat. And again, looks like it failed. So I'm going to go back to logcat again, scroll up until we see something. Why did that? Let me try running one more time. La, 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 la. Well, that's interesting. I'm going to clear the package mine on this and see if we see something coming up a little higher. So it's not showing the exception that I expected it to show. And I'm trying to see if there's any indication on what it is, because I know what the error is. I just want to try to show you how you can see it. It's related to that EPERM that we saw before, but I'm not sure why we're not seeing that EPERM now. Try running one more time. I'm going to switch this to a compact mode. So I'm going to go in the logcat and change to compact view, which just gets rid of a lot of the data over here. Just makes it a little bit easier to read sometimes. Unable to open data app. No such file. That is very interesting that it's not showing us the error that I'm pretty sure this is. Let me show you what the error actually is. The problem is in this case, we haven't specified the internet permission for the application. And this is if you want to have any type of networking, whether it's on the internet at large or in a local network, you need to specify the internet permission. The internet permission is considered a normal permission as opposed to a dangerous permission. And what that means is that you can specify it without the user having to approve it. We do that in the manifest by saying uses permission, name equals Android permission internet. Wonderful XML here. And I believe that's going to fix this. If not, hopefully we'll see some other type of error. Let me try running this. There we go. So that was the problem, and that's unfortunate that it wasn't showing up. If we noticed in that very first run that it mentioned EPERM, and anytime you see EPERM, make sure you start thinking about there's some kind of Android permission that you haven't defined. Usually it's going to be the internet permission, because that EPERM is usually going to show up on a networking request. I'm just not sure why it didn't show up with the EPERM on that after we fixed the first error. So that's bothersome because it's going to make this thing a little harder to diagnose. This is one of the most common errors, though, is that you didn't specify your internet permission. So let's take a look at the logcat and see what ended up killing it. Socket timeout failed to connect to 10.0.22 after 10,000 milliseconds. So that's interesting. Is our server still running? Oh, that's right. I stopped. I did the invalidate and restart on Android Studio, so it's actually the server isn't running. So let's just, for giggles, comment him out. And if the server's running, let's see if we get that permission error. Okay, so he's running. Let's go ahead and run this. That actually shouldn't make any difference because it shouldn't be able to get far enough to know if the server was running or not. Yeah, I'm not seeing that one either. So my best advice at this point is going to be, if you're doing an internet application and it doesn't seem to be doing anything or is just crashing up front, double check that you have internet defined as a permission. That's unfortunate. But now I'm going to run it with the server actually running this time. And hopefully we'll actually see a list of stuff come up here. So we have movies, MPAA ratings. So we have our ratings showing up and no actors. So the ratings are at least showing up, and that's because they're fixed there. Oh, I just restarted the server, so there's no actual data there. So let's do a reset, which is going to make that reset call to the server. Looks like I probably did not implement him. Yeah, so not yet implemented. So let's take a look at the reset database. There he is, not yet implemented. And we're going to say, go to our Movies API service, and actually I do not have reset implemented there yet. So let's do him. in our movie API service, we're going to have a call to reset. And the response, I believe, is just an int for him. So let's try running that now. I think that'll fix that. Let's try resetting. Oh, I know what I didn't do. I didn't actually do the fetches. We need to fetch, so let's do that. So if we take a look at our movie rest repository, we set up our list flow manager with that fetch function. When we first create it, we're doing an initial fetch. But then after we do the reset, we're not refetching. So in this particular implementation of our REST setup, because we're not using any type of WebSockets or anything like that, we need to make sure that we explicitly refetch things when we do that reset. So after our reset, we're going to do our actors flow manager dot fetch our movies flow manager fetch and our roles, actually a ratings flow manager fetch. And now this should work. Famous last words. Famous because it actually worked. So we have our actors, our movies, and our ratings. Now, if we try to go into any of these right now, like if I go to PG-13, it's going to crash because I haven't implemented actually fetching that information yet. But at this point, that actually gives us, we can see that we're actually hitting that server and doing something interesting with it. Cool stuff. So let's take a look at fleshing out some of these other functions that we need. So we're going to need to have get rating with movies, which is going to return this rating with movies DTO. He's going to have to go over to the server and get that information. So if we take a look at our REST repository, that is our REST repository. Let's take a look at our API service. Let's actually just copy this guy. And suspend fund that. We're going to pass in a way to get a specific rating and then the movies. So let's see. Oh, it looked like somebody was coming in. So we're going to change our get to be rating. Whoops, that's reset. So it's going to be rating slash some ID slash movies. And so if this is what our URL looks like going to the server, well, this will be what our URL goes to the server when we call get ratings with movies. We're going to take that ID and pass it in there. Let me just make sure I got my syntax right on that. I need to add in an annotation for the argument. There we go. So this is going to say that this is an argument that's going to be used on the path here. We're going to take the ID and we're going to stick it in to the path there in order to make our request. I think that's all I needed on him. Yeah. So we're going to do him, and now we can take our REST repository and use that. So we're going to say movie API service dot get ratings with movies, passing in the ID. But notice a little something here. We've got a suspend function. We're calling this other suspend function. This guy is going to be a data fetch. So we're actually going to go across the network. So we want to make absolutely sure that we're running that off of the user interface thread. Otherwise, we're going to get Android complaining at us. So we can do that by saying equals with context dispatchers.io and then make the call inside of there. Now that's going to, because that's the last expression inside the with context, this is the value that's going to be returned. So we're going to call get rating with IDs and return that, hopefully. Now let's do the same kind of thing for those other guys. I'm going to go back to my movie API service. We're going to have movie, we're going to grab the roles, and we're going to have actor and grab the roles. So it's going to get movie with roles. And actually, this one was movie with roles. This one should be actor with roles. And this should be an actor with filmography DTO that comes back. And then this one should be, oh, I did that wrong. Yeah, that's movie with filmography. Oh, movie with cast, that's right. And then actor with filmography. There we go. So those I should be able to pass through as well. We'll go ahead and do that in the movie rest repository here. So movie with cast is going to be something similar to this. And we'll need the same thing here. Movie with roles, passing in the ID. And this is going to be get actor with roles, passing in the ID, something like that. And so these should send the requests off to the server. So we're going to need to implement those guys, those three functions. So let me just grab those three functions here. And we need to go to our REST server. And oops. Make sure I do my case right there. And let's see what we got here. So we have suspend fund, blah, 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 blah. He doesn't have a body. That's what he's complaining about. And we're going to see what we actually set up inside of here. 1 second. Where is there's the REST server. I just want to make sure I get my right annotations in there. And my produces on these guys. And then the same thing down here. And we're going to need to specify some kind of an object to collect the data that comes back. So what we need in this object, if we take a look back at our ratings with DTOs, there we go. This guy, what's in my REST controller? Or no, where is this? So it's rating DTO. So rating with movies ended up having the rating and then a list of movies. So we're going to need some kind of structure that maps to that on our server side. So inside of our REST server, let's take a look at our actor first. We're going to have our actor with roles. And we'll specify the actor here. And then roles. And it's going to be a list of something like role, but we're going to have to actually fix that. What this is going to return is a role object, which if we take a look at him, has movie ID and actor ID. And I really want to flesh those out. I want to go ahead and fetch the movie, fetch the actor, and make sure we actually have a movie and actor that the client can use rather than having them to make another request to go and fetch that. So I'm going to call this expanded role. And instead of movie ID and actor ID, it's just going to be movie and actor. And that way the client's not going to have to make additional calls to the server. You want to try to reduce your calls to the server as much as you possibly can to save the bandwidth that the user has. So we can use expanded role in here instead of role. And now this is actually a pretty nice object to return back to the client. And we're going to do the same kind of thing with the movie with roles. I'm just going to make a copy of him, but we'll call him movie with roles. And we're going to do something similar for rating. It's going to be rating with movies. And he's going to have a rating. I could have just written this one by scratch. And this is going to be movies. Kind of like that. So now that we've got our data set up, let's come back to our REST controller and see if we can actually fix these guys up. So rating with movies is going to be returning rating with movies. Get movie with roles is going to be movie with roles. And this will be actor with roles. Something kind of like that. And let me path param, that's what it is, not path. There we go. So now we have the kind of structure of what we need. We need to actually fetch the data for these guys. So this guy is going to be, let me look up the rating with this ID and then find all the movies that match him. So let's first of all look up the rating with the ID. So I'm going to say ratings index sub ID, and that'll either give us the rating if it's found or null. So if it's found, we're going to get a rating. Otherwise, we need to return some kind of object to say, there really wasn't any type of data for this thing. So we can create some dummy objects to return and just return a dummy object for rating with movie. Or we could create some kind of superclass for each of those that we can just return. I don't think I'm going to want to do that. I want to really be able to keep the type specification on these guys. The other thing we could do is actually have it, well, when we return a not found, we need some kind of entity. So we'd have to make this be nullable if we did that. So what I'm going to do is, and I got to think if I really like this solution, but what I did was create some dummy objects that represent the not found instance of each of these guys. And these objects, we're not actually going to use them for anything, but they're being returned so that we actually have a concrete type coming back that's not null. If somebody on the client side does end up looking at the data, they're going to see the words not found all over the place when they're taking a look at it. I'll have to see if I can come up with a little slightly better way of doing this. But this seemed to work pretty well. So in this case, I'm going to say not found rating. It should be not found rating with movies, actually. I don't think I have one of those. Yeah, not found rating with movies. So it's going to be a rating with movies, and it needs to pass in a not found rating and then an empty list, and that should just be fine there. So not found rating with movies is coming back. And let's do the same kind of structure for these other guys. Whoops. There we go. This one we're going to look for a movies by ID index. That's going to return a movie. And we'll do a not found movie with roles. And then similar down here, it's going to be for actors by ID index. Not found actor with roles. There we go. And so now we can actually change this to be a single expression because we just want to return this value. Can change that to be an expression and get rid of the curly, expression and get rid of the curly, expression and get rid of the curly. And now we just got to figure out what is the positive thing when we've actually found something. So once we found our rating, we need to find all the movies for that rating. So we're going to say movies by rating ID index, looking for that ID. That should return us a list of movies. And now we can just return a rating with movies, rating, comma, movies. Boom. And what's not happy about this? So he's a nullable. So we're going to need to say otherwise empty list. There we go. So this will see, are there any movies out there for that rating? If not, it's an empty list. And then we just create that return object that we got. Boom, we're done. Because we're saying produces application JSON, that'll be marshaled off into JSON, sent back to the client. And we're going to do the same kind of thing down here. So I'm going to say val roles equals roles by, this is for movie, right? Yep. Otherwise empty list. And then we want to return a movie with roles, passing in the movie. But roles gets us in trouble there. Because what we want to do is have those roles be expanded. So we need to convert from the stuff that we received into expanded roles. And that's pretty simple to do. If we get this, I'm going to say map it into expanded role, passing in movie equals, let's go ahead and say role here so we know what we're talking about. Role dot movie ID, and we'll say movies by ID index. Try to find him. Now, if that's not found, we've got some kind of internal error. So I'm just going to say throw invalid state exception here. Now you're going to want to do something better in a real application, but that'll at least get us moving along here. So we've got our movie. We have our actor. And then we have our character. So character is role.character. And our order in credits is role.order in credits. And now we have an object that we can return. So we've converted it into something that actually has fleshed out the data and returns that to the client. Okay, we'll do the same kind of thing down here. It's going to be really similar. So we're going to say roles by actor ID index, expanded role, look up the movie, look up the actor, and then we're going to return actor with roles, just like that. So that should take care of those guys. And I think that's going to give us enough on the server side to be able to display some actual data now. So if we go back to our movie API service, we already had those. That's good. Our REST repository, we have those. I think we're good to go. So let's go ahead and try this. See what happens. See if we get lucky. So here's our movies. I'm not going to go to the movie one. Actually, let's see what happens. Yeah, it goes to the editor and dies. Oh, I need to restart my server because I added new functionality to my server. So let me stop the application. And I'm going to go to my terminal here. Stop my server. Yep. Now keep in mind that the data is going to be all gone now. I'm going to run that again. And if you had a server, you're going to want to really use a database behind it as opposed to an in-memory structure like I'm doing here. But again, we're not as concerned with what the server side is doing. We're really concerned with how we're consuming the data. So we've got him. Let's try running the application again. And we should see the rating list, but not the other list. The other list should be empty. Let's refresh. Boom. Now we got our actors and our movies and that. Let's take a look at our actor. Okay, now that ended up crashing. Let's see what he's unhappy about. Attempt to invoke interface method is empty on a null object reference. So let's take a look at actor display here and see what he's complaining about. So, whoops, let's collapse that and collapse that. So it's on this line here. We have actor filmography is empty. So let's see here. We're trying to cast this to an actor with filmography DTO. So actor with filmography, what does he have inside of him? Let's just double check the type here. So we have an actor. Oh wait, it's the should be the DTO that we're getting. Yeah, actor with filmography DTO. There he is. Okay, so we have the actor and then roll with movie. So roll with movie has. Oh, okay, so this actually is the structure here is very different from the structure that we're passing in. So we're going to want to actually try to map the structure up here a little better. What we really want inside this roll with movie thing, the expanded role that we had, was the movie, the character, and the order. We don't need to have the movie and the actor inside of there. It's just the movie. So we're going to have to set up a roll with movie or expanded roll with movie and an expanded roll. Actually, just roll with movie is fine. So let's go back and see if we can fix that. So we have movie with rolls. So instead of expanded roll there, wait a second. Let me just check to make sure that I'm thinking the right direction on this. So rating. So we have the rating and the list of movies. So that one looks okay. Let's actually see if that's coming up. If we click on a rating, let's see if we get anything. Okay, so we're getting the list of movies and the ratings. So that one's working okay. It's the other ones where we have the movie with roles and things like that. So on the client side, we had the movie with cast and then roll with actor. Oh yeah, so that's actually very different. So our structure coming back should be keep track of the movie and then have a list of roll with actor things. So we really want that kind of two object structure inside here. So let's try to fix that up. So we have our movie with cast. I'll just go ahead and keep it calling that, which is going to return the movie. And then I don't want to call that DTO on the server side. So movie with cast is going to have a movie and then roll with actor. Roll with actor is going to have the actor, character, and order and credits. So that's the structure we want to get. Let's go ahead and put these guys in there, set up our JSON properties. And I'm going to go ahead and call that cast. That looks good. And then, boom. Yeah, it's just because we had the actor down inside here. It was a different type of structure. Actor, character, and order and credits. There we go. So now we just got to set that type of structure up, and let's see if we can actually make that happen. And then we can come back and fix up the actor one as well. So actor with roles, so get movie with roles. This is going to be movie with cast now, is what we called it. And now the whole thing blows up. So we're going to get our roles. And what we want our structure to be here is going to be movie with cast, passing in the movie, and then a actor with roles object, which is going to pass in the actor, and the list of roles. But those are, what was the actual? Oh, the actor, the character, and the order and credits. That's what those are. Okay, I'm back to the REST controller. Just put that little note there. So this is the structure that we want to end up with. So this is going to be the list that we're going to need in there. So let's grab him, put him up here, and so now the actor we're going to put up there like that, and then the character and the order and credits we can put there. We can get rid of that guy. Oh, I'm specifying the wrong thing. It's role with actor. Oof. Role with actor. There we go. So this is going to create our roles thing, and we're going to pass that in here, and there we go. And what else is he unhappy about up here now? So let's see, that was movie with cast. And that should be good now. Okay, let's try that. Now we're going to need to restart our server again because we just changed some structures inside the server. And now we start up our app. Going to reset some data. And let's see if we can look at the movie now. Where'd my logcat go? There he is. Operation is not, the movie one. So get movie with cast flow. Yes, because in the movie one, I had changed the way it worked to use that flow for the movie with cast. We actually want to go the other way. We want to do the actors. So we're not going to be able to do this. I don't want to actually implement that one now. That'd be a little bit more work with flows. Let's go to the movie stuff inside the REST control, or the actor stuff inside the REST controller now. So let's find what our actor structure look like. So we had actor with filmography and role with movie. So those are the two we want. And we'll go to our actor, and we'll change this. So actor with filmography, actor, that guy, and that guy. Let's annotate these correctly. And okay, and then we can get rid of this guy. And now we have the actor with filmography is what we want in this one now. Let's fix him up. So get movies with roles, and now we have this guy here. Actor with filmography is returned. And then inside here, we're going to map these into that other guy, which was role with movie. And we have those guys in there. And then this is going to be actor with filmography. There we go. And then We have this guy up here is unhappy again. And now I think we're going to be okay. So let's go to our terminal. And restart our server. Oh, he's running. Okay. I'm just staring at that, and yep, it's running. Okay, so we'll refresh. We see our movie list. Let's go to our actor list, and let's check an actor. So something is still unhappy. Let's clear that and start again. Go to our actors. Let's click an actor. And let's see what's unhappy now. Attempt to invoke method empty on a null object reference still. Why is it not letting me click on this? Really? It keeps like blinking. Okay, well, actor display line 48. I don't know why it's not letting me go there. And there he is there. So the filmography is apparently coming back as empty. Is it? Did I just specify the wrong name on it? I think that might be what the problem is. So actor, filmography, movie, character, order, and credits. Let's just make sure that I have the right names on those. Actor, filmography, movie, character, order, and credits. So let's see where a null might be returned here. So get actor with roles, actor with filmography. Can roles be null? And I don't think it can. So try to find that and map it. Otherwise, return an empty list. So I don't see how that can be null. Let's take a look at what the server is actually returning when we pass in something like this. So I'm going to bring up my browser again. And let's take a look at actors. So there's all of our actors. We have Amber, Jason, Kevin. Now, those all look good. And so now if I say actor A4/movies. So that might be the problem, is that I'm using a different name for the URL on that. So let's take a look at what we're actually calling here. So when I do my REST controller, this is going to call actor passing in roles as the server. So this is on the REST server. This is the path he's going to respond to, is actor roles. If I take a look at the movie API service, I have actor ID roles. So that looks right. So if I pass in roles here, that looks correct. So we have the roles with the, oh, that's interesting. That looks like the old format coming back from the server. Because it's actually, this was what we originally had set up, where it had the roles were set up this way. So that looks like the old format before we started changing this new format to have that extra nested object. So that's interesting. I wonder why that's happening. Let's go back. That would definitely explain the problem here. Oh, I wonder if it's a cache issue. Let's come back here. if I do a, no, that's not it. Interesting. Okay, well, let's take a quick break. Let's say 10 minutes, and I'll shake this down real quick. It's 8:39. Let's start back at 8:49. Oh, it looks like what's happening is that it still keeps running an old version of the server. And I'm just trying to figure out where that is. There's something cached. I tried doing a invalidate caches. That didn't help. I kind of get the feeling there's a Gradle daemon running that might be doing that. Let's see. I'm going to go ahead and first of all close down Android Studio. Yeah, it's probably a Gradle daemon. I'm going to take a look in my let's see here. I'm not seeing any Java processes there. Because any type of Gradle processes would be running underneath Java. Well, they might be showing up underneath some of the consoles. No, I don't want to use that guy. Let me try closing him. I don't think he was anything. Chrome wouldn't be. I definitely don't want to close the Zoom meetings because that would kind of impact us a little bit here. I'm going to try running that Gradle command from a command line here. And let's see. So we'll go to movies UA2 rest. And we'll do a Gradle W run. So he stopped 5 daemons. So there were daemons running. I suspect what happens is that one of those daemons was actually thinking he could optimize that run. And so we just kept seeing the same one running. Okay, so what is he unhappy about there? Class not found on run server KT. That's interesting. Oh. So, yeah, I know what's happening. Let's take a look at Android Studio, or at least I think I know what's happening. I think it's actually was running the old app that I had been setting up to actually test this stuff out before the class. And if we take a look inside here, I think the package name is different. So run server. So source, main. So movies rest server. I think that name is different than what's in the build script. Oops. Com Android by example, movies, rest server. Oh, I don't even have a run server in there. What? Oh, I see what happened. When I pasted this file over, it gave it a different name. So I'm not, I was actually running my old server this whole time. Wonderful. So let's try renaming this guy. And now let's try running this guy. That's interesting. So there were some Gradle daemons still running from the other instance of the Android Studio project that I have open. And it was apparently finding and running that one. That's really weird. Okay, now let's try and watch the whole thing blow up in my face. Because all along it probably hasn't been working. So the reset seems okay. And now if I go movie, that looks good. Oh, actually, reset. And if I go movie, that's interesting. And actor, nope. Rating will probably work because that was all hardwired. Okay. And now if I say foo, it's going to come back saying hello. Okay. So now we're definitely running the right one. And there's some issues that we need to fix up. Here I thought it was working just beautifully all along here. I should have known it was running too easily. So on here, I'm going to keep foo in there just so I can double check that I'm running the right one once in a while. Let's take a look at our reset here and see what's happening. So we're clearing all our indices, doing our inserts and returning a 1. Insert roles. New actors. So let's throw a breakpoint here. Can I debug that? Let's see if I can debug him. Oops, I'm probably going to have to stop the server running over here though. Okay, let's try that. And come back over to this guy. Let's try a reset and then we'll take a look and see what the data looks like. Okay, so we're down there. So it looks like movies by index we have data. Actors by index we have data. Roles by movies, roles by actors. So it looks like the data's in there okay. So I suspect it's something to do with our actual accessors. So let's take a look up here at, if we get rating, that worked just fine. Movie, when we say that, it should be trying to get all the values and sort them by title. Let's try that and see what we got. I hit my run, oh, not run server. I want to debug the server. Stop. Okay, so who is calling that? Oh, that's just the lines highlighted. He's not called. Okay, so let's go back over to our server here. I'm going to call reset. We're in our browser. That looks good. Let's continue him. And now I'm going to say movie. And that did not even stop there. So what function is actually getting called there? I think it should be calling this guy. Whoops. I think it should be calling that. Slash at the top there. The rating one worked. Why is that not working? Let's actually do that reset one more time. And take a look at the data in him. So movies index, he's a hash map, a linked hash map. That should be fine. So what I want to do is break down that get movies a little bit, just so we can actually see what's going on here. That's one of the problems when sometimes when you squish things down. Whoops, I got somebody trying to come in. There we go. Sorry about that. I didn't notice you trying to come in. One of the problems with using the expression syntax is sometimes it's kind of hard to set a breakpoint. So let's put a breakpoint there. And let's actually see if that is getting called. Oh, well, I restructured it, so I'm going to have to rerun it. Okay, so server started there. Let's call our reset. That break. Maybe I removed that breakpoint. Yeah, I did. Okay. And let's call our movie again. Okay, that looks like that actually broke there. That's good. Step over him. Movies size 0. So let's take a look and see what the data is. So movies by ID index is empty. Interesting. That's very odd. So when I call reset, and then call movies, those are all empty. Let me put the breakpoint on the reset again and make sure that that looks like that's actually got data. Oh, I think I just realized what's happening. I think it creates a separate REST controller instance for each call. So all this data goes away. So I think the way I had it set up in the example that I did before is have the data outside of the REST controller, or we could put it inside the companion object. But let me just check here real quick. I think that's what happened. Yeah, I had those all defined outside of him, because that's what's ended up happening is it creates a separate instance of the REST controller for each call. So let's grab him, paste that out there, and now it should work. So we'll do a reset, and then movie. There we go. That was the problem. And let's try what we were trying before. We'll say actor A4 roles. That's better. That actually looks like the right structure now. Okay, now let's try that. So I'm going to come back over here, stop him. I guess I can just run this from the command line. It's probably okay to keep him running this way. And then I can just switch this back over to the app. No, it's not going to let me run that. So we'll do the command line again. One more time here. Run. And there he is. And now the app. Oh, it's not letting me run it because I didn't sync. What changed in the build script? Oh, I had messed around with that a little bit. That's why. I had to change the. I was checking to see if that was actually changed. Okay, so now it'll let me run that. I should see if it'll let us run both of these. I think it should. So run the server. And then the app. There we go. Okay, I think we're probably back on track now. Running the actual correct server. Run our reset. There's our movies, our actors, and our ratings. So let's pick a rating, and we see the movies. That looks good. Let's go to the actors. There we go. So now that we have the data structure correct, it's actually doing the right information here. Whew, that was lots of fun. But hey, sometimes it's nice to see that type of thing because you'll see, errors that might happen when you're doing things. Although I don't know if you would possibly go down as a convoluted route I just did. I would hope not. Now, if I go to the movie, it's going to crash because of that logic of trying to use a flow to fetch the actual movie with the cast information in it. But anyway, that's looking good. So now we actually have the basis of using REST to communicate with our application. And you're going to have to use it in your application. Let's actually see this other guy here. Is he stopped? Yeah, it looks like he stopped. The application that you're going to be writing is going to be a little map application. And it's not starting this week, but I'll go ahead and show you what it looks like to start with here. So assignments. And we'll go to Gem Match Your Game. No, not Gem Match Your Game, it's the map. Maps and REST. So the assignment that you're going to be doing is you're going to be writing a little alien tracker tool. And what this tool does is it's going to display a map over the Washington, D.C. area. And you're going to be listening to REST requests coming in. So you're going to have a service that you set up in Android. We're going to talk about services next week. And the service is going to be hooking up to the REST service and grabbing the reports of alien activity. So what it'll do is you'll be drawing these little UFOs, and as it tells you the UFO moving around, you're going to leave a path behind it. And then it'll spell out a secret message in the clouds. It's really exciting. So what we're going to be doing for the REST part is just talking to my server to actually get the reports. Now the server is, I'm just using some hardwired, let's see, Aliens 1, I think. Nope, that's not it. Maybe it's just Alien 1. Where's the URLs on this? Aliens1.json. Okay. So I'm kind of simulating REST with this because I didn't want to actually set up a real web server. There we go. And so each of your requests are going to be like 1.json, 2.json, and so on. So you're just going to count through until you get a 404. And it'll tell you information about which UFOs are out there. Like if I go to 20, let's see if I can find one that has more than, there we go. So this one has 2 different UFOs in it. So you're going to be using this information to plot the message on the screen. You're going to be making these requests to my quote unquote server here, which is basically just returning static files. And getting the information. Now, if we were really doing a REST request here, it might just look like Aliens 21, Aliens 22, Aliens 23. So I'm just returning these static files instead, so it's similar to a REST request without having an actual server running and incurring charges for me. Okay, so that's what you're going to be doing. The parts that you really care about inside here, don't worry too much about the REST server. That's somebody else is handling that. I'm simulating that for us. What you really are going to care about is the code inside this repository. And you're not going to have to set up a repository for this. You can actually use the code directly inside of your service. But the things you're going to care about is setting up a REST request using something like retrofit here. And that can actually make a request to the server. And you'd set up your path to say something like aliens slash some number dot JSON. And so that'll end up making the request. You can actually make these calls, get the feedback coming back, parse the JSON, figure out where your ships are, and everything's peachy there. So we'll be talking more about the assignment in general after we talk about Google Maps and after we talk about services. So we should be talking about both of those next week. We really don't have time for either of them this week. Are there any questions you've had on the content from this week so far? Hopefully that made some sense. And then, sometimes it's nice to actually run down these problems so that you can see what would happen if you end up with the same problem. So let's see. I want to go back to Canvas. I just want to see if there's a short topic that I want to hit, since we do have an hour. La 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 la. No, I'm not sure how much time I want to spend on legacy views. I was kind of thinking of spending a whole session on it. So I want to kind of keep that to itself. But I'm going to move services to next week. And we'll push him down for the moment. And something else is going to have to fall down there. Yeah, I don't think I really want to start anything else here because everything else is going to take a little bit more time than we have to go here. So what I'll do is I will give you guys back about a little less than an hour. If you have any questions, feel free to give me a yell. Hopefully the assignment is going well. Otherwise, I will see you next week.